Admiral Zexthera's mandibles clicked in frustration as she studied the tactical display. The hegemony's finest gravity manipulation cannons, weapons that could fold space itself into crushing knots, had failed to breach the human defensive line for the third consecutive cycle. Around her, the bridge crew of her flagship Dominion's Edge worked with practiced efficiency, their 6 arms dancing across control surfaces that governed forces beyond the comprehension of primitive species. "Status report," she commanded, her voice carrying the authority of a being whose species had conquered 17 star systems through mathematical perfection. Lieutenant Kixel's compound eyes reflected the amber glow of his station. "Admiral, our gravity well generators are operating at peak efficiency. Each cannon produces localized distortions exceeding 847 standard gravitational units. By all calculations, their primitive metal hulls should have been compressed into neutron-dense spheres." Zexthera's third eye focused on the human fleet formations displayed before them. 23 vessels, crude by hegemony standards yet somehow still intact despite 6 hours of bombardment that should have ended this conflict before it began. "Run the calculations again," she ordered. "There must be an error in our targeting matrices." The bridge fell silent except for the harmonic hum of computation engines. The hegemony prided itself on mathematical supremacy. Their entire civilization was built upon the foundation that the universe operated according to precise, knowable equations. Their gravity weapons were the ultimate expression of this philosophy, using controlled singularities to manipulate the fundamental force that bound galaxies together. "Admiral," Kixel's voice carried a note of uncertainty that was almost blasphemous in hegemony culture. "The calculations are incorrect. Our weapons should be working." Through the viewport, Zexthera watched as the human fleet began to move. Not the chaotic scrambling she expected from a technologically inferior species facing annihilation, but a deliberate, almost casual repositioning that defied every tactical doctrine she had studied in her 2 centuries of military service. "Incoming transmission from the human flagship," reported Communications Officer Nixara. On screen, the holographic display shimmered, revealing a human face, pink-skinned with only 2 eyes and a disturbing lack of symmetry. Captain Sarah Chen of the UES Determination smiled with an expression that somehow conveyed both warmth and absolute confidence. "Admiral Zexthera," Chen began, her translation matrix rendering her words in perfect hegemony syntax. "I believe you're having some technical difficulties with your gravity weapons." Zexthera's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation. "Impossible. Our technology is mathematically perfect. Your ship should not exist." Chen's smile widened. "That's the thing about humans, Admiral. We've never been very good at math." The statement was so absurd that Zexthera almost dismissed it as a translation error. "Explain yourself." "Well, take gravity, for instance. Your species figured out how to manipulate it by understanding its mathematical properties perfectly. Very impressive." Chen gestured casually as if discussing planetary weather patterns. "But humans, we approach it differently. We don't just calculate gravity, we feel it." On the tactical display, human ships began moving in patterns that violated every principle of space warfare. They danced between gravity wells that should have torn them apart, their hulls somehow remaining intact as they rode the edge of crushing forces. "You see, Admiral, while your people were perfecting the mathematics of gravity manipulation, humanity was developing something your equations don't account for: intuition. We've spent millennia falling down, getting back up, and learning to work with gravity rather than just commanding it." Zexthera watched in growing amazement as human pilots performed maneuvers that made no mathematical sense. They used the hegemony's own gravity wells as slingshots, gaining momentum from forces designed to destroy them. They turned weapons of annihilation into tools of propulsion. "This is impossible," she whispered. The calculations assume that every intelligent species approaches physics the same way," Chen interrupted. "But humans learn to fly by watching birds, not by solving equations. We learn to swim by jumping into water, not by modeling fluid dynamics. We learn to fight gravity by falling down and getting back up, over and over again until we understood it in our bones." A new alarm sounded on the bridge. "Admiral," Kixel's voice cracked with disbelief, "the humans are somehow converting our gravity wells into propulsion systems. They're accelerating toward our weapons." Zexathara stared at the display as human ships rode waves of twisted space-time like ancient sea vessels riding ocean swells. They moved with an organic fluidity that seemed to mock the precise calculations that governed hegemony technology. "How?" she demanded. Chen's expression grew thoughtful. "Do you know what a human child learns before they can even walk, Admiral? They learn to fall. And more importantly, they learn to fall safely. Every human who has ever lived has an intuitive understanding of gravity that no equation can capture. We don't just know how gravity works, we know how it feels." The human fleet completed their impossible maneuver, emerging from the gravity storm completely unscathed, and now positioned at optimal firing range. But instead of opening fire, they simply waited. "Your mathematics are perfect, Admiral," Chen continued, "but they're also predictable. Our approach is less elegant, perhaps, but it has one advantage your equations can't account for. Which is? We're really good at improvising." As if to demonstrate, the human ships began a complex dance around the hegemony fleet. They used gravity wells as shields, turned targeting systems against themselves, and somehow managed to disable hegemony weapons by flying in patterns that no computer could predict, but every human pilot somehow understood. Zexathara realized with growing certainty that she was witnessing something unprecedented. A species that had developed beyond mathematical warfare into something that resembled art. "Stand down your weapons, Admiral," Chen said gently. "Let's talk instead. I think humanity and the hegemony might learn something from each other." For the first time in her career, Admiral Zexathara found herself facing a problem that couldn't be solved through calculation. And strangely, that realization didn't terrify her. It fascinated her. "Very well, Captain Chen," she said, signaling her fleet to power down their weapons. "Perhaps it's time the hegemony learned that some answers exist beyond mathematics." As the two fleets began peaceful negotiations, Zexathara reflected on the day's events. The humans had brought no gravity-bending weapons to this battle, no technological marvels that defied known physics. Instead, they had brought something far more powerful: the accumulated wisdom of a species that had learned to dance with the universe rather than simply commanding it. Sometimes, she realized, the most profound answers were the ones that couldn't be calculated.